All right, so today we are going on a deep dive
Oh, good.
into the book of Proverbs. Specifically, we're going to be looking at chapter 6
Okay.
to see what kind of practical wisdom
Mm-hmm.
it can give us for modern life.
Right.
We're going to be talking about a lot of interesting things like financial traps
Yeah.
and work ethic secrets and even the timeless consequences of things like infidelity,
Well, it's amazing to me how these verses were written centuries ago,
right?
and they still speak to like the core of human nature and
Yeah.
the challenges that we face today.
Yeah, for sure. Like even something like that verse about putting up security
Mm-hmm.
for someone else's debt. Do you think that's something
Right.
that still even applies in our world? You know, we have credit scores
Yeah.
and all sorts of complicated financial systems.
I think it absolutely does. It might not be about literal security anymore,
Right.
but the principle, I think, is really universal. Like, it's about carefully considering what you're doing before you entangle your finances with another person, even if it's someone that you love.
Right.
I think it's really important to weigh the risks
Yeah.
and the consequences, not only for them, but also for yourself.
So it's about boundaries,
Yeah,
even in our closest relationship.
absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
And Proverbs uses some really vivid imagery to illustrate like the urgency of this. It talks about a gazelle escaping a hunter.
Wow.
Or a bird breaking free from a net. And it's basically saying like you got to do whatever it takes to extricate yourself from this situation.
Before it's too late.
Before it's too late. Exactly.
That's a powerful image. It really makes you think about those times when maybe you feel pressured to help someone out financially.
Right.
Even if like your gut is telling you no.
Exactly. And that's a good reminder that you need to listen to that inner voice of wisdom. And, Proverbs is all about developing that discernment. And speaking of wisdom, let's talk about this other character that comes up in Proverbs.
Okay.
The ant.
The ant.
An ant. Why would an ant?
He's kind of random.
Right. But think about it. Ants are like the ultimate preppers. Like, they're working all summer.
Yeah.
They're gathering food. They're storing it up.
Right.
Because they know that winter is coming. So it's not just about hard work. It's about foresight.
Yeah.
It's about thinking ahead.
Being prepared. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is so crucial because I feel like we live in a very instant gratification sort of world these days.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where it's hard to think long term. So, I mean, do you have any habits that you use to kind of be focused on your long-term goals?
Well, I'm a big believer in breaking down large goals into smaller, more manageable steps. Because, it's like those ants carrying those little crumbs, one at a time.
Yeah. Right.
But eventually they've built this whole stockpile. So it's like
a good analogy. I like
each
that.
small step
Yeah.
brings you close to the vision.
Yeah, absolutely. So Proverbs also has this list of 7 things
Okay.
that it says the Lord detests.
Right.
Sometimes they're called the 7 deadly sins, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's relevant to anyone, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Regardless of your beliefs.
It is.
Because it's really just like timeless principles for ethical behavior.
Right.
So like haughty eyes. What do you think that means? Because that seems...
Yeah, it's not just about being arrogant. I
No.
think it's got a deeper meaning.
Yeah.
And I think about it in the context of like online interactions. Like we see haughty eyes all the time in those comments that are just like condescending or dismissive or just lacking empathy.
Yeah, for sure.
It's that unwillingness to really see another person's
That's a good point.
perspective.
Okay, so the next one is a lying tongue. That one seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But are there some
Absolutely. I think there's
more subtle forms of dishonesty
Yeah.
that we should be wary of?
Yeah. Think about how we present ourselves online. Are we filtering our lives to create this false image?
Right. Yeah.
Are we maybe exaggerating or omitting certain details to make ourselves look better?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way.
It's a slippery slope from those subtle distortions to like outright fabrications.
Okay, so next we have hands that kill the innocent. That one seems pretty extreme, but how do you think that applies to everyday life?
Yeah, so on a literal level, of course, it's condemning violence.
Yeah.
But I think on a deeper level, it's asking us, how are we treating the most vulnerable among us?
Yeah.
Are we standing up for those who are being marginalized or exploited? Or are we kind of turning a blind eye? Which injustice.
So it's more than just like the literal act. It's the principle behind it.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. A heart that bots evil. It makes me think of like movie villains.
Yeah, right. But how does this show up?
Yeah, how does this apply to just everyday interaction.
Well, think about like workplace dynamics
Okay.
or social media feuds
Yeah.
or even just like gossip and rumors.
Right.
It's that intention to harm or undermine someone.
Even if it's done subtly.
Yeah, even if it's done subtly or passively. Those little actions can have
Right.
a ripple effect and cause real...
Yeah, that's a good reminder to check our intentions.
Exactly.
Okay. Next is feet that are quick to do wrong. What does that could do?
Yeah, I see that one as a warning against impulsivity.
Okay.
We live in this fast-paced world, and we're constantly bombarded with information and pressure to make quick decisions. But Proverbs is saying, hey, pause for a second.
Yeah.
Reflect. Think about the consequences before you rush into action.
Yeah.
Especially if those actions...
Especially if it's going to hurt.
Could harm.
Yeah, hurt someone.
Yourself out others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, look, before you leap. Okay, so a false witness who pours out lies.
Yeah.
We've already talked about lying, but why do you think that's?
Well, I think it's because honesty and integrity are like the foundation of a just and trustworthy society.
Right.
And think about how damaging like false accusations or misleading information.
Right, especially now when it can go viral.
Can be.
Right.
Exactly. Especially in this age of social media.
Yeah, the truth really does matter.
Oh, truth matters.
The last one is a person who sows discord in a family.
Yeah.
Why do you think that one is included in this?
Well, I think it's because family is like the bedrock of society. It's where we first learn about love and loyalty and belonging.
Yeah.
And to intentionally create division or conflict within a family is to kind of strike at the very heart of that human connection and support.
Yeah, it's like a sacred bond that you're breaking.
It is.
It's interesting how...
And we see this play out today.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, like with political polarization.
Yes, absolutely.
And how social media feuds are like really impacting families.
We see families divided. Over beliefs, over ideologies, over...
It's heartbreaking to see families torn apart.
Yeah.
But before we move on to the next section, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah.
Which one of those 7?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Resonates the most with you?
For me, I think it's a heart that plots evil.
Okay.
It's just a good reminder to check my own... motives and intentions.
Right.
Because, I think we all have those moments where we might be tempted to gossip or to judge or to...
Yeah, we all have those.
Undermine someone.
For sure.
And it's a good reminder to cultivate compassion and understanding.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so that leads us into the next section of Proverbs.
Okay.
Which deals with the topic of adultery.
Yes. And it uses some really vivid, even disturbing imagery to talk about the dangers and consequences of infidelity.
Yeah. It compares adultery to playing with fire.
Yes.
Saying you can't expect to get involved with another man's wife and not get burned.
Right. I think it speaks to the intensity of the emotions involved, both the passion and the pain.
Right.
Adultery is not just a physical act.
Right.
It's a betrayal of trust. It's a shattering of vows.
Yeah, and it can have really...
And it can have devastating consequences for everyone involved.
So how do these warnings about adultery still apply in our modern world?
Well, I think if you think about the foundation of any strong relationship, whether it's romantic or familial or even professional, it's built on trust and honesty and commitment.
Yeah.
And when those foundations are shaken, the whole structure...
It all falls apart.
...becomes unstable. Yeah. And it can take years to rebuild that trust.
That's true.
And sometimes the damage is just irreparable.
It really is a reminder that our actions have consequences. Not just for us, but for everyone around us. So there's a part in Proverbs where it seems to compare the consequences of theft to the consequences of adultery.
Yeah, that's a great...
And I found that kind of jarring.
It is. It is. On the one hand, it's acknowledging that there might be some mitigating circumstances for a thief who is stealing out of desperation to survive.
Yeah.
But then it goes on to say that adultery is just an act of utter foolishness.
Right.
A choice that leads to self-destruction with really no justification or escape from the consequences.
It's like you're making a distinction between the two. Why do you think they would do that?
It seems to be suggesting that while stealing might be driven by a basic need for survival.
Okay.
Adultery is a deliberate choice.
Okay.
That stems from a deeper flaw in character or judgment. It's a violation of the sacred covenant.
So it's not just a need, it's a
transgression against...
That's a character issue.
The very core of trust and commitment.
Yeah. And it talks about...
And it highlights
how the husband's
emotional response of the wronged husband
is going to feel...
saying that he will be furious and show no mercy when he takes revenge.
So they're not saying it's okay
to
take revenge.
Abandoning violence or revenge.
But they're saying...
But it is acknowledging the raw, visceral emotions.
Right. It's like a natural...
Such a betrayal.
Consequence can evoke.
Yeah. So how can we apply these principles about fidelity and trust to our modern relationships?
Yeah. That's a good question to consider.
What are some
what is
concrete things people can do?
Trust and fidelity mean to you?
Yeah.
What are the non-negotiables in your relationships?
Right.
And how do you communicate
That's a great question.
those expectations clearly and respectfully?
Yeah, those are really great things to think about.
Things to think about.
I think that's a great place to pause. Okay. For part 1.
All right.
Of our deep dive. Sounds good.
Into Proverbs. I'm really glad we're doing this.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like we're uncovering a lot of really relevant stuff.
Absolutely.
But we're not done yet. We still have a lot more to unpack. So
yeah, we do.
Stay tuned for part 2.
We'll be back.
Where we'll continue our exploration of Proverbs chapter 6.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive into Proverbs.
It's amazing how much wisdom
we
could still glean from these ancient words. So we left off talking about the devastating impact of adultery.
Right.
And I'm noticing that the next section goes even deeper into these dangers of temptation.
Yes.
And the need for self-control.
Absolutely. It really warns about the allure of what it calls the immoral woman.
Okay.
And just the seductive power of lust in general. Even talk about being captivated by her beauty or like her coy glances.
Yeah, but how do we apply that to the modern world where we're constantly bombarded with tempting messages and images?
It's a whole different ballgame.
It's a different level of temptation.
Yes, it is. But I think the underlying principles still hold true.
Okay.
Proverbs is reminding us that true wisdom is about thinking beyond just the immediate pleasure or the excitement and considering the long-term consequences.
So thinking long-term.
Yes.
Resisting that.
It's about resisting that urge for instant gratification.
Right.
And making choices that align with your values.
It's like building up that muscle. Self-discipline.
Exactly.
It's tough these days.
It is a constant battle, Think about it like this. You're scrolling through social media. You see a post that triggers envy or comparison.
Yeah, all the time.
Right. So are you going to get sucked into that vortex?
Yeah.
Or are you going to choose to focus on what really matters in your life?
I think that's where mindfulness comes in.
That's a great point.
Being able to catch yourself.
Yeah.
And be like, wait, why am I feeling this way?
Exactly.
What can I do to kind of redirect my attention?
Yeah. Proverbs is all about cultivating that awareness, that ability to pause.
Yeah.
Consider.
Look before you leap.
Before you just give into that temptation.
Like that marshmallow experiment.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The kid?
Classic.
They had to choose whether to eat the marshmallow now or wait and get 2 later.
Right. And the ones who could delay gratification.
Yeah, they ended up being more successful later in life.
They developed that crucial skill of self-control.
Yeah.
So Proverbs is basically saying, don't be fooled.
Don't eat that first marshmallow.
By the allure of the one marshmallow. Think about the 2 marshmallows you can have later.
If you're patient, okay, but how do we actually do that?
Right.
Like how do we
cultivate
build that muscle?
Self-discipline.
When we're surrounded by temptation.
In a world that's constantly tempting us. Well, I think it starts with recognizing your own vulnerabilities.
Okay.
What are those triggers
that
tend to lead you down the wrong path?
Down the wrong path, yeah.
And once you can identify those triggers, you can start to put strategies in place.
Okay.
Whether that's setting boundaries, avoiding certain environments, or surrounding yourself with people who support your goals.
That's so important. It's also about having a clear vision of what you value most.
Yeah.
So you don't get distracted by the shiny objects.
Exactly. If you have that strong sense of purpose.
Yeah.
and direction in your life.
Yeah.
It's much easier to resist those temptations that don't align with your values.
Absolutely. Okay, so towards the end of chapter 6, there's this interesting shift from focusing on all these external temptations, adultery, lust, to a more internal focus on honoring your parents.
Yes.
It's like once we've learned to navigate all the external, now it's like, okay, now let's look inward and build that strong moral compass.
It's almost as if it's saying, okay, once you've learned to handle the external challenges,
external stuff,
now it's time to turn inward and cultivate that strong moral compass that comes from
and it's rooted in like
the values,
honoring and respecting your parents,
instilled in you by your parents.
It says, my son, obey your father's commands and don't neglect your mother's instruction.
Yeah, keep their words.
Oh, wow.
Always in your heart.
Yeah.
Tie them around your neck.
These are some powerful metaphors.
Yeah, it's like saying their guidance should be so deeply embedded in you that it becomes
a part of who you are.
A part of who you are.
Yeah. But what about people who have complicated relationships with their parents?
Right, that's a good
one. Or whose parents don't really share.
Yeah, and it's important to acknowledge that not everyone has had those positive or healthy relationships.
So what do you do then?
With their parents. So in those cases, it might be necessary to seek guidance and wisdom from other trusted mentors.
Okay, so it's not
role models.
Blind obedience to your parents, but it's about having that strong...
It's about recognizing the importance of having a strong...
Whether it's from your parents or
from all foundations.
Someone else you look up to.
Exactly.
And Proverbs actually says that.
And it says that...
Your parents' guidance...
is like a lamp.
Is like a lamp.
And a light. To help us avoid pitfalls.
It's a beautiful image.
It is.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do we actually put that into practice?
Yeah.
How do we tap into that inner...
Yeah, well, I think it starts with
light.
Reflecting on the values that were instilled in you.
Okay.
Whether by your parents, by mentors, or just by your own...
Or just life experience.
Life experiences.
Okay.
What are the principles
that
you hold dear?
What are my values, right?
What are the beliefs that shape your worldview?
Okay, and then once I know that...
Right, and then...
How do I actually live that out?
How do you make sure they're reflected... in your daily...
In my daily life.
Choices and actions.
Okay.
You know, it's about being mindful of those values in every situation you face.
Yeah.
So when you're faced with a difficult decision, you can ask yourself, what would my wisest self do?
Okay, so almost like...
What choice would be most...
consulting my inner compass.
Aligned with my values.
Exactly, and calibrating that compass.
It's like having that inner compass guiding you.
And make sure it's
ongoing.
It's still pointing in the right direction.
Process.
Yeah, so to sum up what we talked about in this segment, Proverbs is urging us to resist the allure of quick fixes, instant gratification, and to really think long term.
Think long term.
Yeah, it's about cultivating self-discipline.
Yes.
And internalizing that strong moral compass.
Exactly.
Based on our values. Well, our journey of wisdom continues.
It does.
In part 3 of our deep dive.
Yes, it does.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Proverbs chapter 6. It's amazing how relevant this ancient text still feels today.
I know, right? It's incredible. And I think for this last part, it would be valuable to step back and kind of look at the bigger picture.
Okay, I like that.
You know, like what is the overarching message of this whole chapter? And how can we apply...
Yeah, how do we apply this wisdom...
that wisdom to our modern world?
Yeah, to like our everyday lives.
Exactly.
What are like the core takeaways?
Well, one thing that stands out to me is this constant emphasis on making wise choices, owning your actions, and really considering the long-term consequences.
It's not just about following a set of rules, right?
No, it's not that.
It's more about developing a way of thinking.
It's about cultivating a mindset of wisdom.
Yeah, whether it's about money or resisting temptation or even honoring your parents.
Right.
It's about thinking ahead.
It is. It's about thinking ahead.
Being strategic.
Being strategic.
Aligning your choices with your values.
Aligning your choices with your values, exactly.
Okay, so that makes total sense.
Yeah.
But how do we make this ancient wisdom practical?
Right.
How do I actually
How do we apply
live this out to our daily lives.
In my everyday life, what are some things I can do? Well, one thing we can do is to just regularly engage with wisdom literature itself.
Okay, so like Proverbs and other...
It doesn't have to be just Proverbs.
Okay.
It could be other ancient texts.
Right.
It could be the philosophical works.
Yeah.
It could even be modern books.
Right.
And articles that just kind of...
Things that make you think.
Challenge your thinking.
Right.
Encourage you to grow.
It's almost like having your own board of advisors.
Exactly.
Giving you their insights.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So we can read wise books.
We can also be intentional about surrounding ourselves with people who embody those qualities.
So people that I admire.
That we admire, yes. Okay. People who are thoughtful, insightful.
Right.
And just make wise choices.
They set a good example.
In their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We also need to be open to learning from our mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because honestly,
every experience,
even the challenging ones,
that's when you learn the most.
Holds the potential for growth and wisdom.
Right.
And if we can approach those experiences with humility and a willingness to learn.
Yeah, to learn from it.
We can extract those valuable lessons.
So mistakes are just sticking stones. Exactly.
On the path to wisdom. Well, I think we are just about out of time for today.
All right.
But as we wrap up this deep dive into Proverbs chapter 6.
Yeah.
Is there like one final...
Here's one to ponder.
Oh, okay.
If you could choose just one proverb.
Okay.
From this chapter to serve as your guiding principle for the week ahead.
I like that.
Which one would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, I think you'd be the one about the ant.
Oh, nice.
Because it reminds me to just be diligent, work hard, be prepared, just focus on one step at a time.
Love it. I think for me,
what about you?
I'm drawn to the imagery of the lamp and the light representing the guidance we receive from our parents and mentors. Yeah. And it reminds me to cherish those relationships and to seek out wisdom from those who have walked the path before me.
That's beautiful. Well, I think that concludes our deep dive into the timeless wisdom of Proverbs chapter 6. We hope you enjoyed it.
Yes.
And that you learned some valuable things to apply to your life.
Absolutely.
So until next time,
keep seeking,
keep diving deep.